The snow outside Zurich had barely begun to melt. Inside a dimly lit garage tucked behind an old tram depot in Altstetten, a young mechanic named Luca Meyer tightened the drawstrings of his faded blue hoodie. The morning was silent, except for the distant hum of a tram and the sharp click of a torque wrench resting on a bench. This was not just any morning. It was the start of something he had waited for over 6 years. In the far corner of the workshop stood the skeleton of an old Corolla AE 92. Its paint was cracked, the body pitted from years of alpine winters. Yet the chassis was straight, and its soul still alive. Luca called it Rosa, named after his late grandmother who once drove him through the mountains in it, back when it still purred like a kitten. Now it was silent. For too long. Luca stepped toward the metal workbench, where the 7A engine block sat wrapped in a gray fleece blanket. Forged pistons gleamed from the tray beside it, catching the light like a row of silver soldiers waiting to march. "Today we build," he whispered to himself, glancing at a photo of his father taped to the wall, a former rally driver whose career was cut short after an accident on the Furka Pass. He slid on a pair of gloves and began cleaning the cylinder bores with meticulous precision. Every wipe of the cloth brought back memories of Saturdays spent watching his father rebuild carburetors on the kitchen table. Each part was laid out in precise order. The crankshaft, freshly balanced in a machine shop across the river in Erlikon. Custom connecting rods, imported from a tiny firm in Sheffield. And a torque plate, hand-machined by an old friend named Marcel, who once worked for BMW's engine development team. There was no instruction manual on the bench. Just a notebook filled with sketches, torque values, tolerances, and notes scribbled in a rush of caffeine-fueled nights. This wasn't just engineering. It was personal. The block was ready. He oiled the bearings, lowered the crankshaft into place, and exhaled. From the doorway, a shadow appeared. "Luca," came a voice. "Still chasing ghosts?" It was Jonas, his closest friend, part-time welder and full-time cynic. Luca didn't look up. "They're not ghosts," Luca replied. "They're unfinished chapters." Jonas stepped closer, gazing at the engine. "That thing's older than you are. You could just get a 2JZ and be done." Luca cracked a rare smile. "But then it wouldn't be ours, would it?" The two stood in silence, the scent of oil and old steel filling the air. Jonas shook his head and left, muttering something about coffee. Luca tightened the main caps and clicked his torque wrench 3 times in a rhythmic pattern. The engine was beginning to take shape, slow, methodical, and with reverence. He turned off the overhead light. A single lamp remained on, casting a halo over the nearly completed bottom end. Outside, snow began to fall again. And inside, something mechanical had begun to stir back to life. Luca opened his notebook again that evening. The same pages he had flipped through hundreds of times. Drawings in pencil, smudged with oil. Notes written in sleepless nights. At the top of the first page, in capital letters, it read, "Precision is louder than power." It was a quote from his father, Raphael Meyer. A man who never chased horsepower, but balance. The right timing, the perfect gear change, the engine breathing in harmony with the road. Luca circled the page, with the piston-to-wall clearance values. The forged pistons from Sheffield had tighter tolerances. He had to double-check everything. He placed the piston rings onto the second cylinder and measured the end gaps with a feeler gauge. His hands were calm, focused. Outside, Zurich's streetlights flickered in the snowfall. Inside, the workshop smelled of brake cleaner, fresh oil, and steel. Suddenly, a loud knock. Luca opened the side door to find Eva, his sister. She hadn't been to the garage in over a year. Not since they sold their childhood home. "I brought you food," she said, holding a thermos and a small brown bag. He took it, surprised. "You're still building that engine?" she asked, glancing at the exposed pistons. "Yes." She stepped in further. The workbench was cluttered with blueprints, torque specs, and diagrams. Luca cleared a spot for her to sit. "I never understood why this car matters so much," Eva admitted. Luca paused, tightening the rod bolts. "Because it's the last thing we all built together." Eva looked at him, eyes softer now. "It won't bring him back, you know." Lucas said nothing. He simply turned the crank by hand.
Smooth. Silent. Perfect.
I know, he said finally, but it reminds me how he worked. And how I should live. Eva stood quietly, then left the bag on the bench. There's Apfelstrudel in there. Don't let it freeze. She left without another word. Lucas sat back down. He grabbed the micrometer and continued measuring. The pistons were in. The rings gapped. The rods torqued to spec. But in the silence of the garage, one shadow still lingered. The voice of doubt. Would this engine ever run? The heater in the garage was weak. Frost formed on the inside of the window panes. Luca pulled on a second hoodie, his breath visible with every exhale. He set the ring compressor into place. With the pistons now fitted with gapped rings, it was time to install them into the bores. He oiled everything twice. No second chances. The first piston dropped in clean. He tapped it gently with the wooden handle of a mallet. It seated perfectly. He looked at the clock. 2 a.m. His hands shook slightly, not from nerves, but from the cold. He opened the thermos Eva had left. Lukewarm coffee. Still better than nothing. One by one, the pistons slid into the block. Each one with its own rhythm. A symphony of silence and discipline. Then the phone buzzed. A message from Jonas. Meet me at Autostube. 11 tomorrow. I've got something for the Corolla. Luca frowned. Jonas never got up before noon. He slid the phone back into his pocket and returned to his work. The rotating assembly was complete. Crankshaft. Pistons. Rods. Bearings. Everything turned freely. Smooth as water. He stepped back, watching the lamplight dance off the oil-coated components. There was beauty here, but not everyone would see it. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the engine turned. Slowly. Gracefully. The block was alive. But Luca knew the real fight hadn't even begun. The next morning, the snow had turned to slush. Luca rode the tram to Cockbrate, then walked the final few blocks to Autostube, an old car part shop run by ex-racers and hobbyists. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. The air smelled of rubber and warm espresso. Behind the counter, Jonas waited. You're late, Jonas said, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. It's Zurich. Trams don't wait, Luca replied. Jonas reached under the counter and pulled out a dusty cardboard box. Inside, a set of Toda camshafts. Luca's eyes widened. Where did you get these? Friend of a friend in Geneva. Paid with favors, not cash. You're welcome. Luca inspected the cams. Still wrapped in wax paper. Authentic. These are for the head, Luca said. I'm not even close to that. Jonas leaned in. Then get moving. This engine deserves more than theories. Luca left the shop with the cams under his arm, his heart racing. Toda cams. The same ones his father once tried to order before the accident. Back at the garage, he placed them gently beside the unopened 4A G20 valve head. The old silver top was stripped and bare, but the soul was there. The story was no longer just about rebuilding. It was about finishing something that had started long before he understood it. The cylinder head sat on the bench, quiet and cold. The silver top 4A G was once the heart of Toyota's high-revving legacy. Now it was Luca's next challenge. He stripped the head completely, every bolt laid in order. He checked the valve guides, lapped each valve by hand, and cleaned the combustion chambers until they shone. The ports were mildly polished, not too aggressive. He believed in balance, not obsession. As he installed the Toda cams, something strange happened. He heard a voice. Not from the street. From the inside. It was faint. A whisper. Tighten. Then breathe. Luca froze. He was alone. It was the same phrase his father always used before a rally stage. One twist of a spanner. One deep breath. He looked around the empty garage. Nothing. Just the sound of snow melting on the roof. He shook his head, almost laughing. Maybe building an engine from memories was riskier than he thought. Still, he followed the whisper. Tighten. Then breathe. It was Sunday. Most of Zurich was quiet. Trams rested. Shops closed. The city exhaled. But the little garage in Altstetten buzzed with low jazz from a dusty speaker. Luca worked with purpose. He was assembling the head onto the block. The metal felt colder than usual. Even with gloves, he could sense the weight of it, not just physical but emotional. Years of planning, months of saving, days of doubt. The MLS head gasket was laid in place. He lowered the head gently, bolts arranged like a clock face. Torque sequence memorized. He clicked each bolt down in thirds, then paused. Eva entered the garage, holding something small in her hand.
A key. Rusty.
Familiar. I found this in Mum's drawer, she said. Luca took it, eyes wide. It was the original key to the AE92, still with the red leather tab his grandmother had stitched on herself. He placed it on the bench, beside the valve cover. I didn't think we'd ever find it, Luca said. Eva shrugged. Maybe it was waiting for you. No smile. Just understanding. As Eva left, Luca returned to the head. He spun the cams, slowly by hand. They moved.
Smooth.
Without resistance. The engine was no longer parts on a table. It was one piece. But it still needed fire. By Thursday, the wiring loom was rewrapped. Sensors labeled. Injectors tested. The intake manifold fitted. Throttle cables adjusted. Jonas showed up just as Luca was filling the engine with 10W60 racing oil. No coolant yet? Jonas asked. Luca nodded. Just oil and air. I want to hear it. Jonas looked at the engine bay. The 7AG hybrid sat snug, tucked between the strut towers like it belonged there from the start. Fuels in? Jonas asked. Fresh lines. Filters new. Jonas stepped back. Moment of truth then. Luca connected the battery. No sparks. No smoke. A good sign. He turned the key once. Nothing. A second time. The starter clicked. Then silence. Jonas tapped the fuel rail. No pressure. Luca checked the relay. Swapped it. Tried again. This time, a cough. Just a whisper of life. He turned the key again. The engine cranked, coughed once more, then stopped. Luca sat down on the concrete floor, hands covered in oil, heart pounding. Not yet, he said quietly. Jonas lit a cigarette, offered one to Luca, who declined. It's close, Jonas said. I've seen worse run. But close wasn't enough. Not for this. Not for Rosa. 2 days passed. The garage was quiet. Luca stared at the engine, unsure of what had gone wrong. The compression numbers were strong. Timing checked. Injectors pulsed. Spark confirmed. But no idle. He pulled out the old map his father had kept in the glove box, a topographic layout of Furka Pass. Corners marked with red pen. Elevation notes. Brake zones. It reminded Luca that some things required patience. That not every turn was about speed. He returned to the engine bay. Then he saw it. A small vacuum line, disconnected beneath the intake manifold. Barely visible. Probably overlooked in the dark. He reattached it. Tightened the clamp. Rechecked everything again. Twice. Jonas arrived with a grin. Ready to scare the neighbors? Luca didn't answer. He turned the key. The engine roared to life. Idle rough. A bit high, but alive. The sound filled the garage, raw, uneven, but unmistakably 7AG. Jonas clapped once, wide-eyed. Luca just stared at the tachometer. 1,200 RPM. Holding. No leaks. No smoke. Just music. The kind only mechanics and madmen understand. 1 week later, the Corolla rolled out of the garage under its own power for the first time in years. Exhaust rasped. Idle still imperfect. But it moved. Jonas followed in his Golf, trailing the smell of burning oil and hope. They drove past the lake, through Wiedeken, then up the winding road toward Jutleiberg, Zurich's local hilltop, a tradition for every builder, racer, and dreamer. Luca shifted into second. The new cams made the engine surge with each pull. It wasn't fast. Not yet. But it wanted to run. At the top, they parked beneath bare winter trees. Jonas stepped out, silent for once. "You did it," he said finally. Luca turned off the ignition. The engine clicked softly as it cooled. "No," he replied. "We're just starting." The city lights glowed below. Luca opened the bonnet. The engine steamed gently. A heartbeat. Alive and flawed. Perfectly unfinished. He didn't take a photo. He didn't post it online.